The arrangement of the statute, any contemporary Indian statute like the Income Tax Act, is what we saw in our last session. How is the act arranged? What is its pattern? Every act starts with a preamble, followed by section 1, section 2, section 3 onwards, and the schedules or the annexures, the addendum to an act. The purpose of each is what we had seen. What does the preamble do? What does section 1 do? What does section 2 do? And so on. And we concluded in our last session saying that section 2 is always made last. Section 2 is kept for the end, since it defines technical terms, and when you begin an act, you do not know what are the technical terms you're going to use. So once the act is completed, including the schedules and the annexures, then section 2 is made, detecting and defining all the technical terms used in the act. So section 2 functions or operates like the internal dictionary of the act. Technical words defined by section 2 shall have that meaning wherever the term is used in the act. So as I was telling you, income tax is very, very disciplined in the sense that there is a method in the madness. You have to go in the sequence. Unless you understand the preamble, section 1 will not be clear. Unless section 1 is clear, section 2 onwards will not be clear. So I propose to follow the sequence of the act. What does the preamble do? What is the preamble to the Income Tax Act? The preamble, we have seen, is the introductory part of the act, laying out the statement of purpose. Why the act? The preamble to the Income Tax Act of 1961 lays down 3 objectives. The purpose of the Income Tax Act is to, number 1, as expected, as is the case, mobilization of revenue raising revenue. Income tax is a chief source of revenue for the government of India. Every person to whom the act is applicable, every person defined by the act as an assessee, is expected to pay a tax on his income based on the ability to pay. Adam Smith's canons of taxation. So the purpose of the Income Tax Act, one of the primary purposes, the major purpose of the Income Tax Act, is to raise revenues for the government. As your income, so your tax. So one purpose is mobilizing the revenue. Second is to streamline or to channelize resources and savings in the economy, lying scattered, floating around. So one of the purposes is raising revenue. The other purpose of the Income Tax Act is to streamline, bring all of them into one track. The savings, investments which people or in the economy make. Streamline the resources, life insurance premium, health premium, contribution to specified funds. Once these are encouraged by the act, people will start diverting their savings to those which get income tax benefits. So through various provisions, the Income Tax Act proposes to streamline resources and savings which are lying scattered, which are huge in the economy. And third, though very, very distinctly, indirectly, bringing about a balanced economic development of the country. We have all heard of Mumbai, but very few of us have heard about Digboi. Digboi is in Assam. Digboy is one of the chief sources of petroleum and petrol products in India. Very rarely heard of. Northeast. Mumbai, world famous. 4th largest populated city in the world. Mumbai everyone has heard of, but Digboy nobody has heard of. And I'm talking of the east and west of the same country. When India develops, when India grows, it should be a uniform growth. There should be a consistency. Not that some cities grow out of proportion and the other cities either do not grow or grow downwards. How can the Income Tax Act achieve this is very distant. However, we do have provisions trying to focus on investment in the Northeast, industrially backward states, industrially backward areas of different states in the country. So through a few provisions, the Income Tax Act proposes to bring about a balanced economic development in the country as a whole. This is the preamble to the Income Tax Act 1961. The purpose behind, the reason behind, the rationale behind promulgation of the Income Tax Act. Revenue mobilization, channelization or streamlining of resources and savings, and bringing about a balanced economic development of the country as a whole rather than in pockets. These purposes laid down in the preamble are so important and so practically relevant whenever we deal with various provisions of the Income Tax Act, every single provision for that matter. I would like you to relate it to the preamble. Every provision, Section 80C, Section 80IA, Section 10AA, when these sections have been made or laid out, which of these parts of the preamble does that actually propose to achieve? A nice exercise. You should make it a customary habit. Try to relate provisions to the purpose in the preamble. So every section, every chapter, every area that you study, try to relate it to the preamble and identify which of these objectives is achieved by that particular provision. So that is the preamble to the Income Tax Act as to why it is made, why the act, what is the parliamentary objective behind the Income Tax Act. So going in the sequence, the next would be Section 1. The purpose of Section 1. What does Section 1 to an act do? Why only the Income Tax Act? Every contemporary Indian statute. What is the purpose of Section 1? Section 1 lays out the extent, scope, applicability, and the effective date of the act coming into force. So the preamble had 3 objects. The next is to answer these 4 parts of Section 1. To whom does it apply? To whom does it not apply? Does it extend to the whole of India? Or does it extend to the whole of India excluding the state of J&K? And with effect from what date would that come into force? Now the Income Tax Act, as per Section 1, as laid down in Section 1, extends to the whole of India except J&K. And it came into effect on the first day of April 1962. Most of the statutes related to commerce, business, finance, economics follow a financial year instead of the calendar year. A financial year is the period from 1st of April up to 31st March following. So to make a beginning, we made the beginning on the first day of April 1962. So the Income Tax Act extends to the whole of India except the state of J&K and shall be deemed to have come into force on 1st of April 1962. 12 years post-independence. What was happening during those 12 years? It doesn't mean that there was no Income Tax Act. It was the old Income Tax Act, the 1922 Act, which was not made by India for India. It was made by the Britishers for us. They left it. And we worked on an Income Tax Act for a period of 12 years. And finally, it was ready to be applied. Because when an act is made, it has to go to the Lok Sabha first, get an approval. After it is made by the concerned ministry, then it goes to the Rajya Sabha. President has to approve it, convey his assent on the bill, which becomes the act, and then published in the official gazette, the government's publication. So all that was complete as of 1/4/1962, with effect from which date the Income Tax Act came into full force in India. So our first financial year under the Income Tax Act was 1962-63, during which the assessment proceedings, you'll understand that a little later, started. So we had a formal own Income Tax Act with effect from the first day of April 1962. So that is section 1 to the Act, which talks about the extent, the scope, the applicability and the effective date of the Act coming into force in the country. Now, strictly speaking, the next in line or the next in sequence is section 2. Section 2 of an Act, like the other Acts, Income Tax Act also, is technically called the interpretation section, which defines technical terms. The Income Tax Act has about 50-55 definitions, all put in the form of subsections 2(1)(a), 2(1)(b), 2(7), 2(8), 2(9), and they are all, thankfully, in the alphabetical order. The definitions start with the definition of the term agricultural income and goes on up to zero coupon bonds in alphabetical order. Since it is a dictionary, and a dictionary is not a textbook, a dictionary is a referencer, we will not take up all the definitions in our discussion here for our session, but we will take them by and by whenever necessary under different chapters or divisions of provisions. However, I would like to lay down certain terms which are very commonly used in the Income Tax Act and define them. You need to get the meanings of certain terms, since from the word go, those terms are used. Like, for example, assessee, assessment, assessment year, previous year, income, person. There are 8 to 10 terms which are very commonly used. So, I would like to lay them straight here. We'll come to the definitions under the Income Tax Act, a few definitions which are necessary throughout the Act. The other definitions, like for example definition of the term business or definition of the term capital asset, transfer, we will take them at the respective points when they come up in the Income Tax Act. So what I propose to do next after dealing with the preamble and section 1 is to identify and define technical terms applicable throughout the Act and not section specific or chapter specific. There are certain terms like assessment year, a very important concept used almost in every alternative sentence. Assessment year, previous year, person, income assessment. These are certain terms common throughout the Act. From the word go, these words are used. So at this point of time, let us delve into the meanings of these terms. What exactly is and what is the relevance of the concept of assessment year, previous year, person, income, and assessment? So we will take up these terms, define them as per the Act, so that once they are defined, you are able to relate this whenever I use the term in different contexts under the Income Tax Act. So to begin with, it is assessment year and previous year, a coupled concept, very necessary because that actually freezes or crystallizes the point of time for taxation. The taxation, whether it is direct or indirect, there should be a taxable event. It's a general principle or a canon of taxation. Which period, which point of time, which day, which event does the taxation relate to? For example, in the GST, the Goods and Services Tax, the taxable event is rendering services or supply of goods. In other words, when goods are supplied, GST liabilities are attracted. When services are rendered, GST liabilities are attracted. So rendering services or the supply of goods is considered to be the taxable event or the point of time relevant for taxation. Similarly, under the Income Tax Act, we have two yardsticks: the assessment year and the previous year. As the name indicates, assessment year is the year in which the assessment is done, in which the income, loss, tax payable, refund receivable of a taxable entity of a person is determined. So the concept of assessment year is incomplete without previous year. So previous year is the year in which the income is earned, and assessment year is the year in which it is taxed or assessed to tax. And everything in the Income Tax Act is based on these two pillars of the previous year and the assessment year. They are relevant to each other, they are related to each other. Assessment year is with respect to a previous year and the vice versa. So we need to understand those definitions first. Assessment year is defined by section 2(9). And the previous year is explained by section 3. I'm using my words carefully. I'm not using the word defined. It is explained by section 3 because definitions are in section 2. And in a definition, every punctuation, every letter is important. Where the comma is put, where the S is used, the plural and singular, the past and the present. Definitions are dangerous. Meanings are helpful tools. So we move into these two definitions now. The concept of assessment year and previous year in the Income Tax Act. I am coming to the first definition, which is relevant at this point of time. Others will take it up by and by. Assessment year. Assessment year means the period of 12 months commencing on the first day of April in a year and ending with the 31st day of March of the subsequent year. 1st of April 2016 to 31st of March 2017. 1st of March 2022 to 31st of March 2023. 1st of March 1987 to 31st March 1988. So it is a 12-month period, but taking two pieces of two different calendar years. Assessment year, simply put, standardized, is the period of 12 months commencing from the first day of April and ending with the 31st day of March of the subsequent year. So the financial year right now on is 1/4/2020, which will end on the 31st of March 2021. That is a financial year, that is the latest financial year, the latest assessment year. We are in that as of now. The first day of April 2020 up to 31st March 2021 is the latest of the various assessment years which started from 1962. The Income Tax Act came into full force on 1st day of April 1962. So 1962-63 was the first assessment year. So this is the time frame of an assessment year. What is the relevance of the definition? That is the year in which assessment is done by the Income Tax Department of every assessee's, every taxpayer's income, loss, compliancing, filing of returns, payment of tax. So assessment is nothing but a procedure by which all these activities are done by the statutory authorities, by the Income Tax Department, in respect of every taxpayer of the country. So assessment year, according to section 2(9), we can, to make it short and sweet hereafter, call it AY. So as per section 2(9), the assessment year means the period of 12 months commencing on the first day of a particular year, April, ending with the next following, 31st day of March. So this is the latest that we are in. So this is the definition of the term assessment year. Of course, it is relevant. It is understood only completely with the term previous year. So next we come to is the definition of the term previous year. That we will take up in our next session. Thank you.